Fans for Life podcast. I'm Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. Shahnavaz, 4-game win streak.
We're back.
It feels like every podcast is like a Netflix TV show because each episode is really good or really bad. So dramatic either way.
Like the Mike Tyson fight?
Yeah,
God,
speaking of dramatic.
Waste of time.
My gosh, man. That was over the top hype for nothing. Absolutely
the
nothing.
worst fight I've ever seen.
And, I think especially when it's all about money, right?
Yeah.
I feel like because the first 2 rounds, Tyson was getting it in. He was ready to go. And then you see that viral clip of, Paul saying some whisper in his ear. And then the rest of the fight, Tyson looks like a grandpa.
Just they got the bag. That's all that matters. You know what the worst thing is? Jerry got the bag too. So Jerry doesn't care.
Yes. That's why the Cowboys are struggling.
God.
Hey, Travis Hunter is coming.
Or Shador. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. All right. So, Shahnavaz, this episode will be about the Mavs' 4-game win streak. The good things going on, like PJ Washington stepping up without Luka, even stepping up with Luka, just doing the things that the Mavericks need. We'll also talk about Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes looking like elite role players in this league, finally getting those expectations set upon them early in the season. And then also Klay Thompson, we'll talk about his shooting struggles and what's going on with him in the last 5 games. So Shahnavaz, 4-game win streak. Obviously, they beat the Spurs, the Thunder. That was a close game. The Pelicans, my goodness, that was just a gauntlet. And then the Nuggets, it feels like it's in the contract. Like you have to have a close game between the Mavs and Nuggets. It feels like I can think of 4 or 5 close games between the two teams, which makes great theatrics, but also the Mavericks just pulling out those games as well, especially in the clutch, which was a big weakness with this team early on in the season, including slow starts. And it seems like they're slowly getting things handled, especially in the last 10 games overall. They look like a top team in the league. So Shahnavaz, just overall, what's your thoughts before we get into PJ and the rest of the players? What's your thoughts on the 4-game win streak that you see from the team?
We said this last week that, I mentioned I wasn't worried. I think
Call full collected Shahnavaz.
It's too early to tell, man. Like things, especially when you're and you talked about this on Twitter, the integration of Najee and Quentin Grimes and how that's gone, the first couple of weeks of the season. We've said it so many times that it takes a while to get people, integrate new players within the team. Everyone's trying to figure out their roles. You're trying to figure out minutes. What does the rotation look like? Who plays better with who? And then right off the bat, you lose PJ Washington, you lose Derek Lively to injury for a couple of games. And so it really throws things off. But at the end of the day, the Mavericks were still top 10 in defense and offense when you looked at the raw numbers. And so that gives you, you kind of take solace in the fact that things are working out. They're just losing games that had they had one of those guys, they probably would have won. And so now you're seeing that even without Luka, last night against Denver, the Mavericks still able to pull out a win, even though it should have been, a blowout based on the way that the game was going the first half. But it's a gritty win. It's a game that they don't win probably last year before the trade, even maybe after the trade, right? Like this was just a very resilient win, everybody doing the little things. And within this 4-game win streak, the game against Oklahoma City, you saw the impact that a lot of the role players have on this team now that they're getting healthy and they're getting the pieces right. Kid is finally figuring out the rotations. There's still some question marks, obviously, like you mentioned, Klay struggles and things like that, but we're not even to December yet, and the Mavericks are, the sky was on fire, a couple weeks ago, and now we're sitting here with a 4-game win streak. They're half game out of 5th place in the West, and getting Luka a chance to rest against 2 Eastern Conference teams that are struggling as well. It's a good position to be in if you're the Mavericks. And if you look at, again, if you just look at the numbers, like this is still a top 5 team with respect to offense and defense. They're playing their brand of basketball. They're doing what they need to do. It's just some of those games just didn't go their way. And I think, a report came out last night after the win against Denver that the Mavs had a players and coaches meeting after that loss against Utah, a game that they should have won, and they really collectively as a team sat together and said we're better than this. We've got to play better than this. Here's what each person needs to do, and that's the leadership of the coaching staff, of Kyrie Irving, of guys like PJ coming in and saying, we know how good of a team we are. We just have to play our brand of basketball. And you're seeing that in the 4-game win streak.
Yeah, and that's where it all goes down to is it's an 82 game season. I mean, that's cliche to say, but it really is because, as hot as the Suns and other teams have played early in the season, they have the same record as the Mavs now.
Yep.
They lost 5 games in a row and the Mavs won 4 games in a row. That's just how the season goes. Like you just go in your ebbs and flows of the season until you see where the standings may fall at the end of the season. And that's the beauty of a season. You can have the worst of luck, which the Mavs had. Like if you take into those 4 games where they lost by 8 total points, I mean, like you said, if a couple of those flipped, or even all 4 of those flipped, I mean, you would be having the Mavericks in the same light as the top teams in the league, like Celtics, Cavs, and Thunder, and those folks who the Mavs just beat. Obviously, they didn't have their bigs, but you're showing, like you said, the resiliency of this team because the Mavericks are hurt too, and they're able to find wins, and that's what you really want to see from the players on this team is the ability to find wins and the ability to play as a team. And like you mentioned, coaches finally finding his rotation, and that's the beauty of it as well. It's not just the players, it's the coaches too. They got to find who plays well together. They got to find who gets their shots in certain spots, like PJ starting the game, to get him going. And it just goes back to finding rhythm. And you said, the Mavericks might lose this team before the trade deadline last season, might lose this team after the trade deadline. They might lose this game at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, very true.
It's just great to see a team win and players stepping up. And then also, like you're seeing with the rotations, Kid has figured it out. Grimes, when he plays longer, he plays better. And then Dinwiddie, he's not going to play when Luka's out. When Luka's playing, he's going to play when Luka's out, and then he has big shots when Luka's out. And so it's starting to get where people know their roles on this team, and when players know their roles, and I think Kid said it at the beginning of the season, that's the beauty of success for a team. Going deep is everyone knowing their roles and being the best that they can be within that role.
Yeah.
So I think things are starting to finally get rolling for this team, and it's good to see, especially with Luka out, because last year or the year before, when Luka's out, you got to have Kyrie scoring like 40 and doing a lot of the dirty work. But with this team, you have multiple guys who can really step up and just, as bad as it sounds, who can dribble.
Yeah, and 7 players in double figures last night, and with an off game from
3 games in a row.
Yeah, with Kyrie having a poor game, Klay Thompson not scoring. I mean, you would have never thought the Mavericks would win a game against the Nuggets with the 2 stars on the court having poor games, and yet they still pull out a win.
That's a good point. Yeah, and especially the tear that Kyrie has been on. We talked about it last podcast, but my goodness, he's playing at an all NBA level. And then last night, you get a sense of reality because you watch so many great games of Kyrie, and you have this game, and you're like, okay, he is human, because Watson was doing good on him, and it's crazy to see, like you said, without Luka and Kyrie having an off night and other players shining. So that's a perfect segue. Other players shining. PJ Washington, for example, we talked about it. He's the heart of this team. He's the energy. He's the glue guy. He's the X factor. I mean, we can keep going with PJ Washington because, when he plays, the Mavericks are really, really good. And when he's been out this season, they've really struggled, especially from an energy standpoint. But specifically with him without Luka, the game against the Thunder, the game against the Nuggets, he's averaged 24.5 points, 15 rebounds. 15 rebounds, because a lot of people forget Luka is a great rebounder, and PJ Washington's grabbing those rebounds, and he's shooting 53.6 percent from the floor and 50% from beyond the arc. Obviously, only 2 games, but without Luka. And what have you seen from him specifically without Luka, or just overall in this season from what the Mavericks need?
He's been everything. I mean, everything is advertised. I mean, what a pickup last year from Nico, and we saw what he brings to the team in the playoffs. We saw it, on the run to the finals. But
Mm-hmm.
for him to step up the way he has, I mean, you're seeing the work he put in the offseason to become a better shooter. Now he's the primary defender on the opponent's best player,
Mm-hmm.
and this team completely looks lost without him. And he's. I was thinking about this last night. He's the Mavericks version of Draymond Green for the
Mm,
Warriors. Like Draymond does. Draymond brings the energy for the Warriors. Obviously, PJ is a better offensive player, but
yeah.
Draymond does all the little things. The rebounding, the passing, defending. That's kind of what PJ is for the Mavericks. Every team's got that one guy that kind of things. It kind of keeps everything collectively together, and I think that's what PJ brings to the Mavericks. And you talked about the lack of rebounding when he was out, and the Mavericks losing some of those games that they were out rebounded by. They should have won. Defensively, they kind of fell apart in some of those games at the end. That's not happening with PJ in the game, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So to have him back, from injury, he's playing at probably the best he's played in his career. And I think he loves being here. He loves being a part of this team. And that goes back to leadership. That goes back to, just the kind of player he is to be able to put in the work and get better. And again, understanding his role. With Luke out, somebody's got to step up. And he's taken that responsibility to be able to come in and really just showcase what he can do. And he does the fact that his jumper has improved. Obviously, his interior play has improved a lot. We saw a lot of those floaters last year that he was really good at, but making all the right plays on offense, defending on
Mm.
defense. I mean, is such a smart player, and I think you can really see the joy he has playing with this team ever since the deadline last year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, not only he loves playing here, and not only he fits here, he's from here.
Yeah,
There's a sense of pride putting on that jersey. I mean, he talked about it a little bit last year when he got here, but there's a sense of pride, when you wear Dallas and you're from the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. It really puts a honing on you yourself personally, and you want to go out there and perform for the team that you watched growing up and going to games. But I do want to ask you, Shahnavaz. So obviously, when Luca is out, he just goes on a tear. But when Luca does play, he's more of a rebounder, more of a floater, just finding his spots. You're not being as aggressive as he is without Luca. Does that go into your mind any at all?
no, I mean, I think he knows his role, right? Like when
Yeah.
when you're playing with guys like Luca and Kyrie, I mean, obviously you're going to defer to them. They're your two stars. They're going to be the ones who carry the team. But I think you've seen a much more concerted effort this year to get everyone else involved, to take the load off of Luca. Right? We talked about it
Mm,
earlier. PJ bringing the ball up and Luca not having the ball in his hands, and to be honest, it didn't really work out. The first few games.
true.
And so I think going back to that, but if you have other players that step up, like PJ and other guys that the Mavericks have brought in, it's just going to take more pressure off of Luca and Kyrie, where they don't have to do everything. Obviously, if there's nights where they're cooking, you're going to give them the ball and you're going to let them go to work. But the Mavericks, to be successful, are going to have everyone playing their part and doing what they need to do. And that's we saw that in the finals last year when really everyone struggled and it was kind of just a Luca show. And we've seen that's not a recipe for success. So if PJ can sustain this, even with Luca back in the lineup, it's just going to make this team that much more dangerous.
Yeah, it really is. And then that's a perfect segue, because it's really, like I said earlier, it's kind of bad to say, but it's actually nice seeing players who can dribble, because this is the NBA. They've worked their whole life to get here, but, it's just not part of their game. Like, just for instance, Derek Jones Jr., Tim Hardaway Jr., and Josh Green were more play finishers, where they're being set up. And now
Yeah.
you have Najee, who can create for himself. You got Grimes, who actually can dribble and play within the system. And then you have Klay Thompson, who's showing more of an effort to dribble and be within the offense than he was in Golden State. So it's just nice to have more guys, like you said, because when Luka's out, it's mainly the Kyrie show, but now it's still a team.
Yeah.
You don't panic when Luka goes out. You say, okay, other guys will step up. And that's the comfortability, but also just the assurance that you have a good team. And that goes into our next topic, Najee and Grimes, because Najee, he's been on a tear the last 5 games. And Grimes has too. Now that, like you said, players are finding their roles. And that's what the beauty of PJ Washington's game is. But now you're seeing it with other players in Najee and Grimes. So with Grimes, the last 5 games, he's averaging 11.2 points. He's averaging 4.6 rebounds, which is really good from Grimes, and 3.2 assists. He's shooting 51.4 from the floor, 45 percent from the 3-point line. And then you go to Najee, who really can do it all. Actually, last game, he's finally hitting threes. Like, when he can hit threes, I mean, he's a complete player, because in the last 5 games, he's averaging 15.8 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds. He's shooting 59.6% from the floor, and then 27 from the 3. What are you seeing in those 2 guys last 5 games?
It's exactly why the Mavs got him. I mean, you're swapping out Tim Hardaway and Derrick Jones Jr., or Josh Green and Derrick Jones Jr. for Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall, and they're both giving you exactly what you wanted. I mean, I know there was a lot of talk about Quentin Grimes getting a couple of minutes in games that the Mavs lost, but I think he was still trying to find his footing. I mean, let's not forget, this is a guy that is coming off a couple of years of injuries, and is a relatively new, he's still a young guy. He hasn't played in the league that long, and I think he still had to earn the trust of the coaching staff, and the way he's fit in the last few games. I mean, getting the start over guys like Jaden Hardy and guys like Spencer Dinwiddie with Luka out. I mean, that's a big vote of confidence from the coaching staff, and I'm sure Kyrie appreciates having him on the floor. Defensively, I mean, he was the guy who was guarding Steph down the stretch, before the Warriors started switching on to Luka and Lively in that loss against Golden State. So there's a lot of confidence in Quentin Grimes. You're seeing how capable of a player he is. We saw him earlier in the year not kind of playing Josh Green-esque, not taking shots, looked a little uncomfortable, but I think he's starting to fit in a little bit more. And Najee Marshall looks like a better version of Derrick Jones Jr., just minus the athleticism. I mean, the defense is comparable. I mean, Derrick Jones obviously I think was maybe a little bit better in terms of steals or getting to the ball, but Najee as an on-ball defender has been phenomenal this year.
Yeah.
And you talk about offensively, I mean, gives you a lot more than Derrick Jones Jr. did. From just his interior game. Derrick Jones Jr. was, obviously a high flyer, the flashy dunks. We saw a lot of fast breaks, but Najee with those floaters in the lane, I mean, he's hitting them at an insane clip. And to your point, if he starts hitting his threes like he did last night, game over. I think with PJ being out, Najee got to play a little bit more. We saw him kind of get his legs under him, his confidence going, and now you've got a solid rotation where you don't have to play PJ 40 minutes a game, 38 minutes a game. You can split them very much like you split Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. You've got multiple pieces on this team that are interchangeable because of the way that they play, and it's all very similar, and it helps the flow of the team. It helps the way the team plays because you're not bringing in pieces and bringing in players off the bench that play vastly different than your starters do. So it's all lends to this continuity of the game flow and how the Mavericks play offense. And it's beautiful to watch. Even though the Mavs did blow that lead last night, it was Najee, PJ, and Derek Lively down the stretch that kept them afloat, and helped them to win that game. With Derek Lively's defense, the 2 huge blocks, Najee's defense on Jamal Murray down the stretch, just unbelievable. I mean, watching Najee Marshall play has been such a joy this year because it's so fun, and the way he attacks the basket and the way he's playing, it gives you so many more opportunities with this team.
Yeah, you said it best. Just starting with Grimes, he like you said, at the beginning of the season, he really was Josh Green-esque. I like that how you said that, because he was passive, and that's what kids said. That's why he wasn't playing. He wanted him to take a shot. He wanted him to make a shot, and he wanted him to play his game. And that's why you're seeing the beauty of his game now, because after he had that tantrum in post game, because he said he's not a plus. He said the
Yep.
whole bench is not a plus. It just sparked the whole bench and Grimes, because that next game he did not play at all against the Nuggets, and then ever since then, like you said, because the following game was against the Warriors, and he gave him the luxury to play more, and they said, okay, let's see how you bounce back, and he did beautifully. Like, he was guarding Steph the best you can because it is Steph.
Yeah.
So I like that, because ever since then you're seeing the confidence. Like, we just named the stats, but you're seeing it's matching the eye test too. Beyond the stats, he looks comfortable. He knows when to be aggressive.
Yep.
Like, you would not see Josh Green, and respectfully, because I liked Josh Green, we just wanted to see him play like this, consistently, because you would not see Josh Green take the threes that Grimes does. Like, Grimes, he doesn't just wait for his shot in the flow of the offense. Like, a couple of those threes, he said, I'm just going to shoot this, because I'm feeling good. And that's what we wanted Green to do.
That's exactly right.
And that's what you're seeing. Like, you're seeing his confidence soar. And he did credit Kid. He said Kid's a player's coach. He allows you to play. He allows you to figure it out on the court instead of just from the sideline. Hey, you got to do this. You got to do this. Like, and that's part of Kid's flaw too, because it's the beauty and it's the flaw, because he like you said, the Nuggets came back and Kid still allowed them to figure it out instead of calling timeout like Rick Carlisle used to do. Every time a team made a run, call timeout.
Yep.
He lets players figure it out on the fly, because these are grown men. Like, these are not college players. Like, you got to eventually figure it out, and it worked out for them, which will help them in the long run. And then Najee Marshall, I mean, when you look at his drives, obviously don't take this out of proportion, but they're Giannis-esque, because I tweeted earlier, like, he's an elite finisher for a forward when he drives to the paint. Like, his shots in the restricted area, 71.4 field goal percentage. In the paint, non-restricted area, still in the paint, 59.5. And then when you look at Giannis, for example, obviously he does it at a bigger sample. Restricted area, 73.5, and in the paint, non-restricted area, 44.9. Najee has just been automatic, and we love PJ's floaters. Najee is even better at them so far this season, and that's a huge compliment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a really good point with respect to Kid. I mean, you're right. It is, it's kind of, sometimes it's head scratching, because it's like, why aren't you calling a timeout? When a team's going on a 14-0 run or a 12-0 run like last night. But it's also, I feel like for him, it's, he knows he's got leaders on the court. Like, he knows the influence that guys like Kyrie and Klay have on this team, and even Luka when Luka's playing. Like, you've got two guys on this team that have won championships, have been through the ringer. That they can, let them rally that group together. Do what you do from the sidelines. But I feel like he has immense confidence in Kyrie and Klay as champions to let them, not micromanage them, essentially, right? Like, you talk about when you're at work.
Good point.
Do you want a guy who's micromanaging you, or do you want somebody who's like, you're a grown man, like, get your job done. Like, I'm going to let you take care of it. You messed up, like, go fix your mistakes. That's what you want. You don't want somebody hounding over you, standing over your head all day long. Like, I think the Kid understands that. And yes, it is frustrating at times, because it's like, oh my God, call timeout, regroup. But to your point, let them figure it out. They're grown men. This is what they do for a living. Like, they'll let them take care of it on the court.
Yeah, and it really helps your flow, like, because, it could hurt you. A timeout could hurt you. And obviously, like you said, sometimes you're wondering, like, okay, when is he going to call a timeout? They just went on a 24 run. But, like you said, because if you do call a timeout, you're also giving the other team an opportunity to regroup as well, who's obviously hot, scorching on the on the court. So, just he allows leaders to lead. And that's the beauty of his coaching. And he allows players to play, because, like earlier, if you're not playing well, he's not going to play you. And he's honestly a coach you want to have. And I know, online social media, every time Mavs have a bad game, it goes to Kid or
Yep.
they want him out. But like he's honestly a coach that you want to have on your team. Like you mentioned the work analogy. I mean, when you're performing, he's not going to take you to the side every single 5 minutes. Like he's going to talk to you on a monthly basis. Like unless something's going wrong and you elevate issues to him, he's going to allow you to do your projects and do your work, but if you're not performing, he's going to say, all right, I'm going to get someone else to perform this job
Yeah.
for you. And that's what you want as a coach. He's very blunt in a calm way because he's a player. He's been through it.
He's a champion. He's done. He's one of the
Yes,
best
he
point guards
knows.
ever. Like it's and him calling out the bench a couple of weeks ago, I think was such a smart move as well because hold your players accountable. Like we all understand the struggles that the Mavericks were having at the beginning of the year, and a lot of it was attributed to the bench. Call them out. These are new players. They've got to earn their playing time, and you've seen, to your point, Quentin Grimes has done just that. We've seen him reduce Dinwiddie's minutes, as when Luka's healthy and playing Jaden Hardy more because Hardy gives you a little bit more versatility offensively. The combination of regardless of who you start, whether it's Lively or Gafford, but the way that both of them are playing, they shot 85% against Nikola Jokic last night.
Whew.
Combined. I mean, you're talking about a two-headed monster.
And that's without Luka.
Without Luka. Both of those guys combined, the way that that Jason Kidd was switching them out. And look, you're not going to stop Nikola Jokic. No, the dude is the best player in the NBA. You're not going to stop him. But to be able to switch them out and defensively get Lively fresh for the fourth quarter to have those two blocks, just brilliant.
That was big.
Brilliant rotations by Kidd last night.
That was big. Yeah, it really was. And that's the beauty of really having 8 starters on the team. I mean, Grimes, Najee, and take your pick. It seems like they go back and forth. Lively and Gafford, one of those guys, having 3 guys like that off the bench is going to help them in a big fashion at the end of the season, because especially when you have Exum coming back. This is going back to your point at the beginning of the season, how deep this team is, because they're finally finding their roles. And then when this team is healthy, 15 players, it's going to be scary because you're going to have Exum. You're not going to just have Dinwiddie and Hardy. You're going to have Exum. You're going to have Grimes. You're going to have Najee. You're going to have Maxey. You're going to have either Gafford or Lively, whoever is not starting, come off the bench, and that's a starting lineup at the bottom of the league. That's who you could see starting at the with the bottom 5 teams in the league.
And you don't have to rush Exum back. You can let him get healthy. You understand what the depth is for this team, and even when he does come back, depending on your opponent now, and I said this at the beginning of the year, you can mix and match your bench. If you need a little bit more offense, Jaden Hardy plays a little bit more. If you need more defense, you go Dante Exum. You're going to have the options now of, do you want to play small and put Najee at the 4? Like the Mavericks have been doing with PJ out. Do you want to go big and put Maxey at the 4 and Najee at the 3? You're going to have so many options depending on your opponent that it's going to give the Mavericks an advantage over other teams that they play.
Definitely. So, Shahnavaz, with the good, there's bad, right? So, we got to talk about Klay Thompson's shooting struggles. He is struggling the ball. He's struggling to shoot the ball right now in the last 5 games. When you look at it, let's see. Okay, here it goes. So when you look at Klay Thompson's last 5 games, he's averaging 10 points, 2.8 rebounds, 1.4 assists, and the minutes have been spotty as well, because he usually plays over 25, but it's 28 minutes against Jazz, 19 against Spurs, 25 against Thunder, 24 against Pelicans, 23 against Nuggets, because of shooting struggles. In those 5 games, shooting 29.3% from the floor. That's not just threes, from the floor, and then he's shooting 32.4% from threes. Obviously, he talked about, he doesn't care about the shot attempts. He just wants to be efficient. He knows it's going to come. So what's your thoughts on the shooting struggles from Klay Thompson right now?
It's been rough. Let's not sugarcoat it, right? I don't think he's played up to his standards and kind of what we've thought, but I look at the games play, and this is the games Klay plays, and this is where the stats don't tell the whole story, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we know that he's struggling from the field, but you look at the little things he's doing. I mean, he was the Mavericks leader in plus minus last night against Denver. It was
Mm.
+9. You
Yeah.
know, you look at out of the 16 games, I think he only has 5 where he's been a negative on plus minus. And even games like Chicago, he only scored 13 points, but plus 27, 6 rebounds, 1 assist. Last night, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. We've seen him make
Mm.
the right passes at the right time. We've seen him, he still poses such a threat that you see teams close out on him and he makes the right pass. Even
A
if it
good
doesn't
point.
lead to a shot, he'll swing it to somebody else who then swings it down low to Lively or Gafford or out to PJ or I think with Klay, the fact that, he's a veteran, he's a champion, he understands again what his role is. I know we say it all the time, but you know, I also think with Luka out, I think it I want to. I'm wondering what his splits are. Maybe this is something we look up and we can put on Twitter later. But I wonder what his splits are with Luka on and off the court because I feel like
Mm.
with Luka and Kyrie there, I think it probably opens it up a little bit more for him because the defense focuses so much on them. I think now with Luka out, we see probably you're probably paying a little bit more attention to Klay Thompson at that point. And so um, look, the shooting struggles, every player goes through them. Every player has rough stretches. Klay is never going to be the same Klay that he was a few years ago, but the fact that he's still doing the little things on the season, he's a plus 68. So, I know plus minus doesn't tell the whole story, but just watching the game, you can see, him drawing the defense in. You can see him making the right pass. You can see him, taking the right shot at the right time, even if it doesn't go in. I mean, I've no worries with Klay Thompson. If the Mavericks were losing games and it was because of him and it was because of him performing poorly, we could have a different discussion about that. But right now, the Mavs are on a 4-game win streak, even with his struggles. Even in some of the games that they've lost, he's still, he's taking good shots. It's not like he's putting up poor shots. I think they're just not falling for him. But as a veteran, he knows that there's other ways to affect the game, and there's other
Mm.
ways to help your team out, and there's other ways to, to do what your team needs you to do, and he's doing all of those things.
Yeah, it's when I think about his, like you said, because it's tough because he came here to be that lethal shooter, and he came here to put the Mavs over the edge, and he's not doing that yet. He's doing that in other assets. He's doing that other facets of the game. He like you're saying, he's doing the little things. He's really being a connector, on the court. That's kind of his role now when he's not making shots, and that's good to do. Uh, but you also want to see, and I'm not expecting prime Klay, but I'm expecting Klay of last year. Because he still was shooting a clip, and that's what you expect him to do. Because right now he's kind of in that connector Josh Green role.
Yeah.
He's doing the little things, but the shot is inconsistent. Because one game he'll make a ton of threes, and next game he can't make a basket at all. Shooting the ball, and that's the beauty of his game that we're seeing. And we're also seeing him dribble more. Because with last year with THJ, for example, you didn't want him dribbling. Even when he was missing shots, you didn't want him. Even when he was making shots, you didn't want to see him
No,
dribbling.
don't put the ball on the floor.
So, and you have a sense of comfort with Klay, and that's what it really comes down to. Like you said, obviously, we don't have to go into accolades, but he is a Hall of Fame player, and you have a sense of comfort when he dribbles, when he makes decisions, when he shoots it, even if he's missing. When he takes a shot, he's feeling good about it. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, you have comfort. It's a different feeling, than THJ or Josh Green last year. So I have comfort watching him play, even when he struggles. Because one, he's doing the things that you mentioned. And two, you just have a comfort of a guy of his stature. He knows he's struggling. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. Because you could tell he obviously he says it too, but you could tell he knows he's struggling, and you eventually see him getting it back because he has slow starts to the season. And I don't want to make excuses because he's struggling. Like we said, he's struggling shooting the ball. And I'm not expecting a prime Klay. I'm just expecting last year's Klay because he still was shooting good, low for his standards, but high for most of the NBA. A top 3, top 5 at worst shooter of all time. So eventually he's gonna get it going, and when he does, that's gonna make the Mavs so much better because they're already closing out on him, like you mentioned. And just imagine if he's making it, there's no holes in this offense.
Yeah,
And
and you brought up Tim Hardaway Jr. I mean, it's a complete contrast to that, right? Like Tim Hardaway Jr., if he wasn't making shots, he wasn't affecting the game in any other way when he was on the court. Defensively, offensively, he was turning the ball over, wasn't making the right pass, he was taking ridiculous shots. We're not seeing that from
and he
Klay.
was taking more shots.
Yeah, we're not seeing that from Klay, and that's what the benefit of having a player like that.
Yeah, and that's the beauty because Klay, when he's missing shots, he shoots them when he feels good about it. And with THJ, when he was missing shots, he's going to keep shooting until he makes one. And that takes the Mavs out of the flow of the offense. And that's a great point because last night he was missing shots, but the Mavs offense was still flowing. Like it was still looking good. And that's what I like about this team. And then when you look at the other things, I think I have to ask you though, at the same time, to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
When do you get concerned? Like when do you panic if Klay is still having inconsistent nights? Not just inconsistent nights, but nights like where you see he can't make any of the shots beyond their arc.
The Mavs start losing because of him. I mean, look.
Okay. Yeah.
You brought up a good point. His minutes have gone down, right? If we look at how many minutes he's played,
didn't close.
He didn't close, and so that's not a an indictment on him, right? It's again, it's a coaching decision of look, Klay is just not playing well. Let's get Quentin Grimes in there. Let's get Najee in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that ability now because of the depth of this team where you can alternate who your closers are, right? We've seen Gafford close some games, right? Last night we saw Derek Lively close games. Luka and Kyrie and PJ are going to be on the court. Those other two spots, when it's a clutch game and you've got to put your 5 best out on the floor, outside of those 3, who are the 2 that are performing better? Is Gafford playing better than Lively? Gafford's going to close. Is Klay struggling? Quentin Grimes is going to close. Do we need a little spark offensively? Let's throw Jaden Hardy in there. Let's see what happens. But now you've got the ability to do that. And there's again, I feel like I keep saying it, but this is everyone knowing what their role is on this team. Everyone understanding the collective goal of winning a championship. This isn't Klay Thompson saying, I've got to play 35 minutes a game. I've got to close. No, I'm having a poor night. Quentin Grimes is playing better than me. Put him in. As long as we win, that's all that matters.
I like that. Just who's having the best game, and that goes back to the point. They really have 8 starters.
Yeah.
On this team, and that's the beauty of the depth on this team. So Shahnavaz, last word. I mean, when you look at the Mavs schedule, they got the Heat, the Hawks, 2 struggling teams that you mentioned, 2 inconsistent teams that you do have to prepare for. Obviously, you prepare for every team, but like those 2 teams could blow you out or get blown out.
Yeah. And it's back to back.
And it's back to back. Good point. No Luka. Even though Luka with the Knicks game after that. So you got the Heat, Hawks, Knicks, and then Luka should come back after Thanksgiving. So those 3 games, what would you like to see from this Mavericks team against those teams? The back to back is on the road, and then you got the Knicks coming at home, who's starting to finally find their rhythm too. What would you like to see from the Mavs? And who is your starting center?
Oh, I mean, the way things have been working right now, I think Lively's got to keep starting. They played, they're playing about the same minutes, but I think we've seen the last few games. I think Lively's really taken a step forward, being in that starting role, and Gafford still comes in and just abuses people. I think you
dominates those backup centers.
Yeah, I think you said it on Twitter last night. I think the extra 20 pounds was helping him yesterday.
He was doing good against Jokic.
He was. To me, to be honest, I don't think it matters who you start because they're going to play the same minutes. They're we've said it for almost a year now. They're like the same player. So, obviously Lively gives you a little bit more upside and more athleticism, but They both do the same things. They're both excellent defensively. So really, in my mind, it doesn't matter. I would love to see Lively start more, but they're going to play the same minutes. So roughly the same minutes, assuming they're not in foul trouble. What do I want to see? I want to see them if they jump out to a lead, I want to see them hold it. We saw it against New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
But New Orleans was also fielding like a G League team.
Yeah.
I want to see the Mavs consistently hold that lead. Keep it if it's, keep it in double digits if it is. Teams are going to run. It's the NBA. Always, it's a game of runs. We've seen it. We see it time and time again where teams come back. 20-point leads now mean nothing in the NBA. I want to see them now that they're finally getting a little bit healthier. We're seeing the impact that PJ's having. We've seen the impact Najee and Quentin Grimes have had. We've talked about it. I just want to see them keep rolling, keep that consistency, and keep your head above water until Luka comes back.
Yeah, going to the starting big, I mean, it's crazy because it's like every 5 games the other big, does better. Then you're like, dang, I just said
Yeah.
the first big, because they always go back and forth. They kind of are similar, like you mentioned. Obviously, each one of them does something a little better than the other, but the one thing I want to see is if Lively is going to continue starting, I want to see him not get in foul trouble because that does impact the game when he gets in foul trouble. I think he should be starting just for his potential. His upside is bigger than Daniel Gafford, but Daniel Gafford is more stable. Like he's your comfort blanket. And it's weird because you're thinking, this big time vet versus this rising star, but they're only like 5 years apart, because Gafford's still young too.
26,
he's 26.
Right?
Yeah. And Lively is 20. So it's like, it's tough to say which one should start because when we finally say this guy should start, the other guy does better. And I think that's what it comes down to is both guys dominate other backup centers. So the guy who always comes off the bench looks the best. But you have to, I think you it comes to a point where you just have to stay with Lively as the starting center. And Gafford, he finally looks like the energy guy off the bench because he did struggle with that a little bit, with coming off the bench. And now he even talked about his struggles. Like he says, I just got to be more physical. I got to get back to being physicality. I got to get back to having physicality and being aggressive. And you've seen ever since he said that, like you've seen every single game, he is having the maximum effort. And that's all you can ask for. And I think it works now, but Lively does have to fix that foul trouble. And when he does, and I'm not saying don't be aggressive because you can't really tell a player, hey, don't be aggressive, but just no. And we talked about it. That's part of growing in the league, knowing what you can get away with and knowing what you can't. Sometimes, and that's what you see with veteran centers. Sometimes you just have to let a guy score. Like you don't have to challenge every shot. I mean, you want to challenge the majority of the shots, but if you see veterans, sometimes they just say, all right, I'll let him get that one because I missed a step. I was a step late. That's what you want to see from Lively. It's like, okay, I'll just let him score that layup. It's only 2 points, but you only get 6 fouls. So
exactly.
you can't challenge everything. And then what I want to see from the Mavs is what you said, keep a lead, but also I want to see Quentin Grimes. I want to see him continue this momentum. I want to see it like every single game. I'm not saying shoot 45% from 3, which he's doing. I'm not saying give maximum effort on defense because it is a team sport, so you have to play within your role. But I do want to see consistency because you can go all out on defense, but you also got to be not fouling. You got to be set in your defensive scheme. But I do want to see him continue this 5-game stretch that he's doing, at least a similar fashion, because he is the key. Like he is the key. And when I say that, defensive guard.
Yes.
Because the map, like you said, PJ is the best defender, in the lineup. And you're not mentioning any guards. So that's why you want Grimes to continue this because I like seeing him play 26, 27 minutes a game, and I like seeing him guard the best guard. Then you give PJ a flexibility and Najee flexibility to guard the best wing. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So I want to see Grimes continue his fashion. His defense, his offense has been incredible. And I want to see the Mavericks pull out these games because, you know, those chapters that I said, you want the Mavericks to be 12-8 at least at the end of 20 games. And right now they're 9-7. So you kind of want to see them go 3-1 in the next 4 games. If my math is public math, you want to see them take care of business, and that's what it really boils down to. All right, so that's the end of our pod. We appreciate y'all joining. It's a good time right now. The Mavericks on a 4-game win streak. We'll see. Next time we'll talk to you will be after Thanksgiving. So we just want to say and make sure y'all enjoy Thanksgiving, have a beautiful time with y'all's family or friends or just any loved ones, and just cherish that moment together. And hopefully next week when we come back on the podcast, the Mavericks continue this success because they're going to need it. The Heat, Hawks, and then also the Knicks. Those are tough games, but they should be able to take care of business. They should be able to take care of business. Shahnavaz, those 3 games, what's the record? I like when you predict.
I'm gonna go on a limb. I'm gonna say the Mavs go 3-0.
You heard it, folks. 3-0 next 3 games. Goodbye, everyone.